The French Revolution. A period of fundamental political and societal transformation. The masses in France were overloaded by taxes and lack of food, whilst the royal family and aristocracy showed no concern for them. The angry masses revolted against the monarchy. The conflict started in 1789 and ended over 10 years later with the establishment of the French consulate in 1799. The lasting legacy of this conflict was the birth of the modern democratic republic. The French Revolution is considered one of the most important political events in recorded history. The Mongol Conquests. In terms of both historical and genetic significance, the Mongol conquests were very important, all started by Genghis Khan and climaxed into making the Mongol Empire one of the largest the world has ever seen. Khan's war tactics are still studied by up-and-coming military personnel today. The death toll of over 40 million from their conquests rivals many of the largest modern wars in human history. Genghis Khan died around 700 years ago, and 10% of the men living within the borders of the Mongol Empire carry his Y chromosome, and 1 in every 200 men on the planet do so today. The Great Divergence or European Miracle is the socio-economic shift in which the Western world, i.e. Western Europe and the parts of the New World where its people became the dominant populations, overcame pre-modern growth constraints and emerged during the 19th century as the most powerful and wealthy world civilization, eclipsing the Ottoman Turkey, Mughal India, Qing China, Tokugawa Japan, and Joseon Korea. Scholars have proposed a wide variety of theories to explain why the Great Divergence happened, including geography, culture, institutions, resources, and just pure luck. The beginning of the divergence is traditionally held to be the 15th century, with the commercial revolution and the origins of mercantilism and capitalism during the Renaissance and the Age of Discovery, the rise of the European colonial empires, the scientific revolution, or the Age of Enlightenment. Yet the largest jump in the divergence happened in the late 18th century with the Industrial Revolution and Technological Revolution. Technological advances, in areas such as railroads, steamboats, mining, and agriculture, were embraced to a higher degree in the West than the East during the Great Divergence. Technology led to increased industrialization and economic complexity in the areas of agriculture, trade, fuel and resources, further separating the East and the West. Western Europe's use of coal as an energy substitute for wood in the mid-19th century gave it a major head start in modern energy production. In the 20th century, the Great Divergence peaked before the First World War and continued until the early 1970s. Then, after 2 decades of indeterminate fluctuations, in the late 1980s it was replaced by the Great Convergence as the majority of Third World countries reached economic growth rates significantly higher than those in most First World countries. The Crusades. Crusades were undertaken from the 11th to 13th century. All were prompted by the Roman Catholic Church, to obtain further power and influence in the Middle East region, and to retake Jerusalem. The Crusades are historically important from its lasting political and social effects and instilled a long-lasting tension between Europe and the Middle East. The declaration attracted many volunteers, in addition the militaries of a number of European nations, and for nearly 2 centuries. The result, after several attempts over 200 years and 3 million people dead, were unsuccessful. But one benefit from this period was that the Muslim scholars kept intact classical works of ancient Greece, which were lost in Europe but rediscovered from these crusades, which provided the catalyst for the Renaissance. Without the Crusades, Europe most likely would have continued in the Dark Ages for more centuries. The Napoleonic Wars. Between 1803 to 1815, a series of global conflicts between the French Empire and its allies, led by Napoleon I, versus a coalition of European states. The French dominated most of continental Europe. Napoleon was a highly successful tactician, achieving many major victories. The Napoleonic Wars provided a welcome distraction for the USA as the European powers were internally occupied and it was able to progress economically in isolation. The American Revolution. On the road to becoming its own country and the world's superpower, the American Revolution ignited a wave of revolutionary wars across the globe. The French Revolution, the bloodiest revolutionary war in history, was inspired by the American Revolution in addition to Germany's Frankfurt Convention and the Spanish Revolution and Irish separatism. The anti-British protests by India were also inspired by the American Revolution. Qin's Wars of Unification, begun by Qin Shi Huang over 2,200 years ago, and resulted in the formation of China. Before the conclusion of this war, China was consisted of smaller countries known jointly as the Warring States. Since Qin's Wars of Unification, the land known of China has continued somewhat unchanged for centuries. There would not be a China without Qin Shi Huang. The Russian Revolution. Between 1917 to 1923, the Russian Revolution had a huge impact onto the political world. As post-revolution, Russia became a communist nation. The Russian Revolution created a strong fear within the royalty of Europe it would spread to their kingdom. Numerous similar revolutions occurred in China, and other countries with monarchies, with most of these nations replacing their ruling class with communist regimes. The rise of communism was the leading factor of the Cold War. Without the Russian Revolution, large parts of our history would have occurred differently. The Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire. Between 1519 to 1521, the Spanish conquistadors were brutal fighters and their treatment of the natives was horrendous. In addition to violence, they also brought to the Aztec Empire disease and their own culture which wiped out the natives. More than 25 million Aztec people died due to smallpox and other diseases brought by the Spanish conquerors, for which the local population had no natural immunity for. The Americas were no longer safe from certain diseases, and culturally, Latin America is now known for its Spanish-speaking, Catholic worshipping people, with most traces of the previous inhabitants' culture obliterated. The conquest by Spain allowed it to become the Europe's wealthiest and most powerful nation for centuries due to the large amount of gold obtained following the conquests. World War I. From 1914 to 1918, which was also known as the Great War, was one of the deadliest wars in human history. It was the first war to have chemical weapons and biological weapons, and entirely shifting the political and geography aspects of the world. Over 17 million people were killed, the Ottoman Empire destroyed, and Germany's economy in shambles, which set the stage for Adolf Hitler's rise to power and the ingredients for a Second World War only 20 years later. World War II. Between 1939 to 1945, a culturally and politically significant war, and is still regularly raised in discussion during this present day. The Holocaust that happened with the Jewish inhabitants in Europe is still used as a warning today for others of what can occur when evil takes hold of a population. In the aftermath of World War II, it brought about numerous conventions to lessen the chances of genocide and harm to civilians, which changed the way wars are fought. World War II is considered the war to end all wars, and saw action over vast amounts of the globe stretching from Asia, Africa and Europe. Over 80 million deaths were attributed to this war, and remains the only war that has involved the use of nuclear weapons.